Welcome back to the project, the hands-on project demo. This is Teresa again from Lake Grove Elementary Art Lit Coordinator Committee, and I'm here to talk through the hands-on lesson for Winslow Homer, our April 2024 lesson. So we just listened to the lesson. That's in a separate file. You can find that in the Google Drive. And then I'm hoping that this is recording both the presentation, which is at the end of the Google Slides, as well as a hands-on demo over here on this side. So I'll be talking through it. I'll take a little bit of my time in order to explain it. Hopefully it doesn't take that long though, and you can get on your way. It's pretty straightforward. So this time we're going to do a textured seascape. I know that Homer, the whole lesson is all about him doing realism and really realistic paintings. We can't do that in 40 minutes or an hour with the students, especially at the grade levels they're at, in a way that's going to do it justice. So we're going to instead think a little bit more about texture. We can still do some realism inside of the waves and the rocks and whatnot, but we're just not going to take that time to do like people and stuff. We have done people in nature in Morrisseau, so we decided to focus on something a little different for this one. So what you're going to need for this, there's a little bit of setup, not as bad as the Morrisseau lesson though. What we have here is the parents. If you have helpers in the classroom, hopefully enough, we can set up 2 buckets of paint, 2 little cups of paint. So here we have the brown and the black. They'll be in these little squeezy bottles. Please try to make sure that they're shut when you put them back on the cart so they don't leak. There should be extras. The brown and the black is what they'll use first. The green, the blue, and the yellow, you can go ahead and put them here if you think the students can handle not using them right away, but we want to have them not use those immediately. And then in a separate container, I think we need to put the white in a separate one because we want it to be cleaned to get these white effects that you see over on the picture on the left. So that's what you need for paint. The other thing, so you can go ahead and pass those out. The other thing here is there will be a container of salt. We'll use that in a little bit. Older kids, you can maybe even give the salt to them to sprinkle on. We'll talk through that, but don't give it to them right away. Then you then need just a piece of, for painting, we're not doing brushes, we're just doing texture. So we're going to use sponges. The sponges, of course, dry up. This is what they look like when they're really dry. So if you can get them damp, that might help a little bit. They might already be damp considering the number of people that will be using them. If you're doing a Monday class, you might have to get them damp. Maybe we'll put them in a container with a little bit of water to keep them moist. But just so you know, they won't be horrible if you do this. They just don't bend very well, and they're just a little bit not as great. So you might want them rehydrated. And then we have cotton balls. This is what they'll use for brown and black, and you'll want to use 1 sponge for each of those, or 1 end of each sponge, and then the white is the cotton balls. Paper-wise, we have some nice cardstock, so this is nice and thick. It's blue so that they can kind of not worry about covering the entire thing, and then we're going to try to provide, this is just a piece of scrap paper I had, but you can provide a piece of construction paper, because we want them to paint all the way to the edges. And so if their desks, the tempera paints are water soluble, it's totally fine. If they get them on there, it's just less mess potentially. So we'll try to provide some paper on the cart. And then a pencil. Cool. So with that, sorry, I should have been walking through that right here. So you can prep your space. I was saying, have the kids start by putting that piece of paper down on their desk and then the blue paper on top. Of course, we always start with the name. So, we'll put one of these in the cart. So I'm just going to put generic, so name, and then teacher name. I also noticed that some kids in the younger grades can't spell their teacher name. So they can put the room number. That's fine. Flip it over. So the next thing you're going to have the students do is just take a minute and compose the painting. And we don't do this all the time, but we did a little bit with the Morrisseau lesson where you just want to have them look at this painting, which wasn't in the presentation because it's not that, it doesn't have a story in it. It's more of a study, just like we did for Kandinsky. But basically, look at how this painting is arranged. So there's water in the background there. That's kind of the blue and green. There's waves crashing against the brown and black rocks that are in the foreground. We're going to do the same thing. I think the thing to think about here for your students when you're instructing them about this is the younger kids, definitely just think of it from like above almost. But the older kids, if they're interested, they could start to introduce some perspective like you see with the rocks here. So you can think about that. They won't be able to get super duper detailed with the sponges unless they are a little older and have the fine motor control over it. So, and we don't have that much time. Like I said, this art lit is just not very extensive for this kind of oil painting type study. So we're doing something a little simpler. So water, waves, rocks. There's a few transitions in this deck. And then we use those throughout to help keep kids reminding the kids about what they're doing here. So the first step is super simple. You just draw a rocky shore. So in this case, on the picture on the left, I've gone ahead and done like a pretty wavy one. You can also do kind of what we have here, which is a little more like just kind of up like this. Doesn't really matter. This is going to be the shore or the rocks that are in the way. And then there's going to be the rest of it. So just think about the shape you want for the cliff waves. It's just a guide. They're going to paint right over it. So the next one is you mark the waves. This I think is important because it's really, especially in the younger kids, it might be a tendency to just go ahead and paint the whole thing. If you just mark off maybe an inch or two, it can vary. It doesn't really have to be perfect. Just mimic that same line. That way, everything that's inside this space here, and it's a little hard to see with the glare of the light, but everything inside this space here can be left white. So we're just instructed to color in the lines, so it'll be easier. Cool. Okay, then we get into painting. So we just take this and you pick one sponge and just choose one end of it. I guess I'll choose this end and just start kind of painting along the edges. And you can see with the damp sponge, you can get a little bit of that. I'll try to show you what it looks like with this not damp sponge. It's just more like blobby. So that's why you might want to get them wet. It gets a little blocky otherwise. But just have them use a lot of paint. We did cardstock on purpose. It's also fine if the black and the brown touch each other a little bit. We're just layering the rock. So have them think about rocks, think about the texture, and fill the whole thing in. They don't have to worry about coloring it in all the way though, because especially for the water, for the rocks, you might want to have them try to like fill it in, but there's plenty of time to fill it in more later. So you can see I kind of came up to the line, going over it a little bit. Not a big deal. Using the same sponge, they can turn it over if they want, but you see I've already got black and brown mixed together here. So using the same sponge, just go ahead and use the black. And this is where have them remember, we looked at those paintings of Homer's and there's a lot of contrast. A lot of the colors are super saturated, really dark shadows. So they can go ahead and not be afraid of using a lot of color here. This goes pretty rapidly. The danger, I think, is just it becomes a big muddy mess. But honestly, it's the shape is important. They can always layer more color on top later. So that's pretty good. You might want to make it a little less even than what I've done. You could move in, just kind of auto filling as I talk. So good enough for now. Okay, the next part is to prep the paints. So you can set this aside. It's kind of another handy thing to have with the background here. And then you sprinkle on the salt. I'm going to show you what happens when we sprinkle the salt. So again, this can be really fun for the kids. I just don't think it's worth you separating out 20 different dishes of salt. So it's a little easier to maybe go around and either have the kids reach in and grab it, or you grab it and just sprinkle it, or leave a little bit, on their table and they can do it themselves. You sprinkle it and it makes it'll change the texture. You can kind of see a little bit there. It's starting to get liquidy. Oop, I don't have focus. I guess I'll leave it here. You can see it's getting pretty liquidy. So you can put a lot in there. You can put a little bit, up to you. It starts to run. What's interesting about that is just it gives it a different texture. So if we use the other side of the sponge, if you wish to not have to wash as many, you can instruct that. Start with the blue and just at the same time, also I'll just pause. At the same time, you could, if you haven't already put the white paint in, your helpers in the classroom could be putting the white paint in at this point. But if you get this and just leave it on the kids' tables, as long as they this is pretty step-by-step. They should know when to use it and when not. Okay, so then you just start, dab the blue paint, and you can see how it's a little bit different. It's like waterier, and it's really hard to see here, but you'll see it in the classroom. There's more like texture in it because of the salt granules. So you just do the exact same thing where you paint along the edge, going off the edge of the page and up to along the edge of that. But leave this white. Have them leave that, or blank, I guess. Leave that unpainted for now. Cool. If you want to have them imagine, I know last time with the Kandinsky, it was kind of fun to have the kids be reminded throughout of their emotions, have that drive it. You could call on the kids to like think through, have they been at the ocean? Could they imagine what it's like being in the ocean? Is it a calm ocean? Is it a rocky one? I've left the image of the seascape that Homer did in the corner there as inspirations. They can kind of remember, like, the ocean is always in motion, so how can we capture that here? Okay, so we're still on this page. Basically, you want to add green and yellow to it as well. Just remembering the lesson that there's like these kind of rivulets of other colors, or like highlights of other colors. So you can kind of add that in. Some of the kids might think of it as algae, others might really realize it's more about the light. It doesn't really matter. It's just kind of the idea. But that is what would get you that realism effect. So it ties it back to the lesson a little bit that way. You start there. It's very glary, so I don't know if you can really see, but maybe if I change the mode. Oop, that makes it worse. There. Yeah. And you can layer it. So tempera paint takes a little bit of time to dry, but it's not quite as fast as the stuff with the thickened kind of version we did for Morrisseau, so you might have to just wait a little bit. But you can kind of see, you can layer on, you can make it really dark in certain places and whatnot. But this is a good spot to stop because we have a chance to go through a little bit later and add more detail. So, there, if I turn it down a little bit, yeah. The next step is, and the other thing you can do, we'll talk about that in a minute. You can come through, use a cotton ball is the next part to make the empty space. So that's where you set aside the different colored paint, you pull up your white paint, and you grab these cotton balls. They're kind of small. I don't expect them to use, I expect they'll use 2 or 3 of them basically, if not more. And then just come through and do it. The reason they're going to use a lot of these is that you can see that they've probably gone into the space. It's overlapping with the different colors, and at some point you just, your cotton ball gets covered with different color paint. This is pretty simple to start with, but it can get interesting if they want to try to like mimic some of the crashing waves that you see over there. So you can do, you know, a little bit of this. You can do, meaning like swirling it or dabbing it. If that one gets dirty, you can kind of pick up a new one. And then you can even start to get kind of rivulets out into the sea, right? Like you can kind of see over there that the sea in Winslow's picture, in Homer's picture, I don't know him personally, is it's good. There's a lot of white mixed in, actually. But if you can, just kind of help the kids realize what they're trying to do here is like putting in some sea spray. Cool. And I know this is a little impressionistic, but it starts to kind of get at the realism of it. You imagine if you could layering all the paints on just the way someone using oil paints might do. Cool. So yeah, this is where you kind of just add the finishing details. It's pretty fast. They can spend as much or as little time as they want. One thing you can do if you wish is you can sprinkle additional salt on. It adds an interesting layer. I recommend doing that only in the sea area, and the reason is just that the salt, when it's on top, leaves kind of a glistening effect. It's not as effective in the rocky area. You can bring this paint back if you want to, like, you can see how liquidy it got. So that's, if you have to use 3 dishes, you can, or refill people's things, but should be fine. I'm just adding in some extra kind of contrast. It's a little hard to see on the screen with the camera. Add some little yellow splotches, maybe. I do really like a little more white. And if you go too much, that's totally fine. You just go back and get some blue and add that back in again. Going back for multiple layers of blue with green is probably a good idea because look at the deep, well, it's very hard to see, but here. Look at the kind of deep effect that adds. It really adds that depth that you see in the ocean pictures. And these will be quite wet if they end up doing that. So just be aware. Probably a good idea to have, we'll try to put wipes on the carts as well as some paper towels. Wet ones help. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. It's really just about finishing up. You can come through, and if they need more of a certain color paint, it's easy. We put them in these on purpose, so it's pretty easy to just add a blob and then keep on, right? Like, so feel free, don't feel stingy with the paints, it's totally fine. And then if you do run low on paints, they're a little hard to tell because the paint coats the outside, so feel them, and if they're low, please let us know, please email and we'll refill them. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Then there's a bunch of cleanup to do, right? So you can see the different effect on the one on the left, the one in the presentation. It's a little bit different feeling. This one will take some time to dry, but yeah, a little bit different yet again. They're all going to be unique but similar, which is cool. So you put this on the drying rack. Throw away, feel free to just throw away all of this. Please keep the sponges. Do not throw the sponges away if possible. We don't have enough for the entire school. So if you toss this and then rinse these, that would be excellent. And we will have a receptacle to put these back in. And then any leftover cotton balls, if you could just throw them back in the bags, that would be great, or the bins, whatever we have. And then the salt, just please make sure that you put the lid back on, and if that runs low, let us know as well. Thank you so much. I think that is it. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for being a volunteer, and we'll see you in the classroom. Bye.